using the pen tools in Photoshop to create and modify paths. We can create a path to serve as a mask by using any of the shape tools. We can create a path using the pen tool, using the freeform pen tool. Paths are saved with the image they are created in. They're stored in the Paths panel. Now, paths don't print unless they have a fill or a stroke applied. So when you see a path in the Paths panel, or you see that vector line indicated on your graphic, it's not going to print unless it has a stroke or a fill. So let's go ahead and create a path. I'm going to start by using the pen tool. So select the pen tool here. Now the pen tool, I need to click, and the rule with the pen tool is you click, and if you do single clicks, you're going to create all corner anchor points with straight line segments. If you click and drag, you're going to create curved line segments with curved or smooth points here. And you always drag in the direction that you want your line to go. So you're always thinking ahead of where that curve is going to go. And you drag with your handles. That's the part that I have right here now. This is a handle. This is not part of this stick is not part of my line. This tells me the direction that the curve is going to go. And it also tells me the height, or how steep or intense that curve will be. So now that I kept it down, the curve is going to actually go down. Okay? So you can do all kinds of different interesting little amoeba type shapes. You can actually trace around items if you want as well. The freeform pen tool allows you to click and draw as though you're actually using the pencil tool or the pen tool in real life. So it allows you to click and then drag. You're not clicking to create those anchor points. Photoshop is creating these anchor points for you. So now how do we use this in real life? Now I'm going to go to my selection tool here, because I'm allowing, if I use my selection tool, I can select these and then I can delete them. Before I do that, let's look at the Paths panel. All of these fall under one path called Work Path. Remember, that's the temporary path. It's a work path until I actually give it a name. Let's go ahead and select all of these by clicking and dragging around all of them with my selection tool and then pressing my delete key. And you notice the work path now disappears as well. So let's go back to the monarch butterfly. So we can use these pen tools to do some dragging if we'd like. So I have the pen tool and the freeform pen tool. Now with the freeform pen tool, I also have the option to do a magnetic pen. So it's a magnetic pen tool. This allows me to attempt to identify edges. Like I mentioned, it attempts to identify the edges. So if I click here, I only have to click once, and as I drag, you can see that Photoshop is trying to find those edges for me. Now if I wander too far away, you can see it just happened there. So it attached to a different segment, and I can force an anchor point by clicking myself. So I've clicked those points to try to force Photoshop to find the edges. Okay, and of course the faster I go, it kind of misses some things, but I'm not even clicking, I'm just dragging around. Let's go up around here. Not a bad job, but a lot of editing yet to come. Now when I get to the end, I get a little circle underneath a little magnetic icon with my cursor, and if I click, I've now made a closed path. Let's go into paths. So if I name this, now this will be saved with this document. Okay, so even though I see this line here, remember this will not print unless I have a fill or a stroke with it. So now that I have this path, I can convert a path to a selection. Going over to the Paths panel, we have some icons here at the bottom. So here's my fill, path with foreground color. Here's my stroke, and here's load path as a selection. When I do that, I get those marquee the dancing ants that indicate that this is indeed a selection. So that's one way that you actually can create a selection if you're really comfortable with the pen or the drawing tools. Now with this, I'm going to deselect, Control D to deselect. Let's go ahead and click on the path to see it here. Let's select it to make it be active. Okay, now in layers, notice that I don't have any layer with this path. Paths are stored in the Paths panel. So I have to be on the Paths panel and have that path be active in order to go back here and modify the path. So my modifications are just like I would do in Illustrator. I have a selection tool, the Path Selection tool, which actually selects the entire path, and I'm able to move the entire path together as one. Control Z or Command Z to get that undone. If I use my direct selection tool and think of it as directly selecting a part of the path, typically I like to deselect and then go back in and select, and you can see that I can then do some fine tweaks. Now I probably want to zoom in. If you're doing these kind of tweaks, and I'm going to use my space bar to move this around, I know down here we kind of missed some. So I'm going to have to use my direct selection tool here and rearrange the anchor points, and notice that the handles here are trying to make it be curved, so I have to straighten those out. So again, drag this out and then let's shrink down. In this case, I can just shorten the handles and it's going to shorten that curve. Okay, so this isn't an absolute smooth edge. This one needs to be turned around here. So it's fairly organic. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you want it to be fairly smooth. Okay, and this one probably can come down. So of course the resolution of this is not the best, so you kind of have to use your best judgment on how you're going to have this be selected. So you can mess with this for quite a while. We do have some other tools here. We have an add anchor point, so if we do need to add another point, I can click on the path and it adds the anchor point. And I have a delete anchor point, which will get rid of anchor points. Now remember, sometimes the less points you have, the better it is. It makes for a smoother line. We also have convert anchor points, and so that's this last tool, convert point tool. So I can take a point and I can make it be smooth, or I can click on it and make it be a straight, so there's no handles coming out. So it's just going to be line straight in, line straight out. Okay. Now if I wanted to go ahead and select this, like I mentioned, there's a little key down here to make this path become a selection. I can also do a command or a control click on the thumbnail, and that will load that path as a selection. Now as I save this document, this path will be saved with my document, so I can go back at a later time and do some edits to the path. It's always going to be there. So if I go ahead and double click on my hand tool, I can see my full picture here. Everything fits within the artboard, and there's my selection.